Hello, and welcome to Recruiting Hell. I'm glad you're here with us today. I'm your host, Rob Conlon. We are now up to episode 13 of Recruiting Hell, and it is definitely, again, time to bring in more resources for you, our listeners. And today's episode is actually our first part 2 to a topic that we visited back in episode 8, which was self-care. This wasn't actually planned as a 2-part episode, but we had so much packed into the first part and still another few pages of content from our guest to get through. So I thought it was very prudent to bring her back on the show. But before I do, for those of you who are just tuning into Recruiting Hell for the first time, I do always feel it's important to outline the purpose of the show and why we call it Recruiting Hell. So Recruiting Hell is a term that I use to describe the frustration of job hunting in 2020. If you head to any major job site or employer, there are endless opportunities. But it's gotten a lot more and more difficult to land those opportunities for the average person. The whole goal of this show is to give you those tools to help you find a job that brings you both fulfillment and self-worth. Now, not everyone defines their self-worth on their job, but here in American culture, we place a very heavy value on being a contributing member of society, and really not hating what you do every day to pay the bills is of huge benefit to anyone regardless. So the whole goal of this show is to help you navigate through recruiting hell by avoiding the scam jobs, the bad employers, the too much work for too little pay, and the mental stress of being jobless or in a position that you absolutely detest. We're here to help you keep your chin up after your 200th application with no response, your 50th rejection email this month, or a great opportunity ghosting you. In a nutshell, this show is about helping people. And if I can help just one other person out there land a new position, get them out of recruiting hell, that's a win for everybody involved. So again, now the formalities are out of the way. It is once again my pleasure to introduce and invite Christine Berry, licensed professional counselor, to our show today. Christine, welcome back. How are you?
I am great. I'm happy to be here again. This is going to be a great episode.
Yeah, and your episode was, as we were talking about before we started rolling the tapes here, your episode was a wonderful hit, and I think it really resonated with a lot of people. So I'm thrilled to have you back. You're actually my first 2-time guest, so I'm proud to say that. So let's kind of do a quick recap for some folks who are maybe joining us for part 2 before part 1, because, hey, you know what? You can have dessert first. Christine, could you give us a 2 to 3 minute sort of summary of what we talked about last episode to bring us up to speed on what self-care is and how we're going to kind of continue that today?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were talking about self-care and how it is very much more than the treat yourself mentality. So really the takeaways from the first episode that I think are important are first, the 4 types. So we've got emotional, physical, psychological, spiritual. So I'll break those down.
Okay.
Emotional is your relationship with yourself and your relationship with others, working with the Karens in your life, working on setting boundaries, both with yourself and with those people that are around you, being mindful of like the toxic relationships that you have with other people, just kind of being mindful of that. So that's emotional. Physical is health and well-being. So making sure, I think the like kind of the metaphor that I used in the first episode was to make sure that you are feeding yourself in whatever way you need, because if you're not feeding the parts of you that you are going to be working, how are you going to get that job? How are you going to, I think I mentioned, if you go into an interview and you didn't sleep well the night before, it's just going to put you at that lower notch than you probably want to be, and you're not going to be the person that you want to portray. So that's physical. Psychological is personal and professional development. And the takeaway from that is making sure that you take the time to look into things that you may not have looked into before, or maybe you came across a hobby that, you thought to yourself, oh, I want to learn more about that. Or, it could be something completely innocuous, something that you didn't ever think about before, but you came across it and now you have the time in between, doing job applications or updating your resume or whatever that is. And you want to do something for you, because the more marketable skills you have, the better, right? So, like I said, CEUs can be fun.
Right. Yes.
So that's psychological. And then the other one is spiritual. And that isn't, oh, I need to believe in a higher power. It can be, if that's what it is for you. But it's getting in touch with that part of yourself that really is authentic. So taking a nature walk, going to a church service or a religious service, if that's what you're interested in, whatever it is for you that kind of gets you back to that center place. So those are the four. So again, emotional, physical, psychological, spiritual. And then the other takeaway I think really is, we were talking about feeling your feelings and how that's kind of my tagline, but I really think that it applies to everything. You have to be mindful of who you are, what you want, what's going on for you right now. And once you can do that, then everything else kind of falls into place. But you really need to feel your feelings first before you can do anything else. So I think those are the core concepts.
Right. And again, if anybody is, going to be watching this episode, looking back at episode 1, there's a whole lot more in there, but I think that's an excellent little summary to say, hey, if you're really interested in more of this, there's 55 minutes or something like that we went on for.
Yeah.
Longest episode ever. I mean, you're taking the cake on so many things here, but that's good. Okay. So jumping kind of back into where we left off, we talked about the 4 types of self-care. Something that I've kind of preached in earlier episodes of this show is when you get this unemployment or whatever it might be, you hit this snag in your life where it's, I need a job or I have income issues, if you will, because we're on one income. A lot of people say, well, we got to cancel everything. We got to get, just bunker down and do these things. I often encourage folks to cut back, but don't cut out. Mm-hmm. And for those, again, who are maybe new to the show, that's where you reduce the amount that you're spending on non-necessities. And, some little luxuries are very good to have, especially when times are tough. They can kind of be that little island, that little rock for you. So, Christine, I want to ask you, if somebody were to, just kind of take the chainsaw to things and cut everything out, what happens to somebody who takes too much out of their life when it comes to things that aren't work-related?
Yeah. So my barometer for these things is always the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And for people who aren't in therapy work or have never heard of it before, basically it's levels of what we need in order to attain what Maslow called self-actualization, which is kind of that, I want to say oneness with self. And so I'll go really briefly through kind of the tiers, but the very base level is your physiological. So that's food, water, shelter, right?
Sure, right. Things you need to live, right?
You have to do these things, right? You need these things. And so, okay, all those are checked off. Great, right? Next thing, safety. So some of those kind of go into physiological because obviously housing could be safety, but it's security of your body, maybe employment, other resources, supporting your family in other ways other than just financial, but maybe connecting more with your family, because that might be your safe place. Next one, love and belonging. So friendship, family, intimacy of any kind. The important thing with love and belonging is that we are social beings. We need others. And I definitely mentioned this in the first episode that we did, that we are social beings. We're interrelated. We need that. So, I might want to cut out going to certain family events because that might be extra gas. But is the money that you're spending on the gas to go there or do that thing or go to the movies with your family, if that is creating for you a bond that gives you safety, love and belonging, and meets some of your physiological needs, that's important. That's not something that you should cut out, right? So
interesting.
So that love and belonging, if part of that connection includes spending money on a couple of family outings or different, things that you would do to connect yourself to the outside world, really kind of look and see whether or not that's worth cutting out. Because if that's how you as a person get your needs met, then maybe that's not something that you cut out, right? Now we can always, reduce the amount of something that we do. I'm not saying go out every day and get that interaction with people,
right.
But it's important to connect some way. And if you are extroverted and you're just going to sit in the house every day, all day, you're going to go nuts.
You're going to climb the walls. That's for sure.
Right. Exactly. Like you're going to be like, oh, I need to I need to see people. And so if that's really important to you, if that's how you feel cared for, that's something that's really important. Next one is esteem, self-esteem, confidence, achievement, earning the respect of others. These kinds of things are really important because self-esteem is integral to who you are as a person and who you show others and how you show yourself to others. So if you have low self-esteem and you go into a job interview, that's not just going to affect your performance and what you say, even if it's scripted, right? Because what happens is they'll go into that interview and you'll be hunched forward, or you might not.
I'm sitting back further in my chair.
Right, exactly. All these things are related to how you feel about yourself and how you portray yourself to others. And so I'm not saying play a role, but if your self-esteem is tanking because maybe it's connected, right? Like you said in the intro, to how we perceive ourselves, and that's our own worth, and maybe that's a job or what position we hold. If your self-esteem is tanking, then what are the things that you might need to do to make sure that that stays intact, right? So maybe it could be volunteering somewhere to engage with others and have a position, even if it's not a paid position, right? To boost your self-esteem. You're doing something, you're getting out there, you're being proactive, productive, right? And then finally, which if I remember correctly, Maslow, this is like something that like takes years. Self-actualization is the last stage, and that's like creativity, spontaneity, problem solving. Those kinds of things are something that is in the future. It's not, you can't just go through these steps in a week, right? And
it's a process.
Right. And they're fluid. So you may have your self-esteem intact and your love and belonging and your safety and your physiological needs. You may have all those, but then you lose your job. So then you lose your self-esteem. Or maybe you start isolating. So then your love and belonging kind of takes a hit. So you can go down the ladder and back up the ladder. It's fluid, but these are the kinds of things that you need to evaluate when we're talking about cutting back versus cutting out. What do you need to make sure that you feel safe, supported, accepted, loved? How can you do your best work?
Got it. So it's almost, to give kind of another sort of mental image for folks who are listening to this, podcast form, if you will, because I'm going to actually, you have this cute little chart here with little cartoon Abraham Maslow waving at us. It's almost like a meter that you can fluctuate on a little bit. Like, if you're in the orange or the red at the bottom of this meter, this graphic that you're showing me, that's the danger zone basically, because you're not getting those things that are, higher up when you have that self-actualization, your bar isn't full, if you will. So that's very interesting. And again, for those of you who are, going to be, visiting our new website here, which is launching, probably not by the time you hear this, but I would say probably the week after, you'll be able to see show notes and things like that with all the cool stuff that we talk about. So that's good. Continuing the discussion though, Christine, so we all have, and that was a great explanation of kind of feeling and finding out what, the needs were and why cutting back is preferable to cutting out. So we all have these responsibilities to our homes and our families and our communities and our friends, and finding a new job, or maybe even landing something that is just kind of a job to pay the bills. One of our other guests a couple of weeks ago said that, sometimes you do have to suck it up and go be the fry master at McDonald's. And that might be that own person's, sort of unique hell that they're listening, that listener is in. What are some of the techniques that can be used by people to make sure that there's time for them when they have this giant list of things